Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Wellsy Weekly Podcast, the show where I talk about anything and everything. As ever, my name is John, aka Wellsy, and you are listening to episode 53. Now, how many of you done one of those personality tests? You know, the ones where you ask, where you answer a bunch of questions and then at the end you get like a bunch of random letters, like INTP or INFJ or ESTJ. Well, I did one the other day just because I was a bit bored, and I noticed that the first letter means either, an introvert or an extrovert. But when I did the test and stuff, I found it a little bit difficult because I have actually got traits of like an introvert and an extrovert, but this test is like I'm definitely an introvert. Which I thought was a little bit weird. So today what I wanted to do, I just wanted to do a little bit more research into introversy and just like find out if there was a scale really. But before I jump into anything, my question for you today is, do you think you're an introvert or an extrovert? If you want to share your thoughts and opinions, let me know down below in the comments, that'd be much appreciated. Or you can vote in the top right hand corner of this video. So, get your cups of tea ready and we shall begin. So I thought it might be a good idea to look up the definitions of introversion and extroversion. Now the definition of introversion is basically someone who shows the qualities of being shy, preferring the company of themselves rather than others, and just generally being a more quieter person. Whereas somebody who's an extrovert or extroversion basically means the opposite. Someone who's a bit more outgoing, loves the company of other people, and is a very sociable and talkative person. Now, when I think about these traits, I kind of fall into both of these categories. Like, personally, I love the company of people. Maybe not hundreds and hundreds of people, but a small group of friends and gatherings, perfectly fine for me. I really enjoy that kind of stuff. But if that happens for too long or I get too much exposure to it, I get very irritated by it and I just need a break. And what I usually do is I usually have like a day a week where I just try and block out the world, or just have a bit of a me day, so to speak. Just so I help like recharge me, basically, just get back into it the next week. As for shyness though, I can be shy when I meet new people in particular. If I'm alone at a meeting or just like, a social event and I don't have any friends to introduce me, I will keep to myself because it's really hard and scary to actually just like introduce yourself to somebody. Because I've done it enough now to know. That's just a fear and a personal anxiety. And I've tried to beat this, just by, trying to say hi to people to try and ease the awkwardness. And usually what I find is, I'm not the only one feeling a little bit awkward in that situation. So me just saying hi just initiates just like an ease of just like awkwardness between everybody. And it usually ends up pretty alright. But on occasion I do go too far and scare people off as well. If I'm too nervous, I start talking really loud and really quickly as well. And it just scares some people off. So personally, I have traits of both, I think, which is why I think there is a scale. And I'm not the only person to try and figure this out. There is a term called an omnivert, which basically means you're a bit of an introvert, bit of an extrovert, and you've got traits of both. And there is also a lot of research into the behaviour of people and this kind of introversy scale, so to speak, from people like somebody called McCroskey and Jonathan Cheek, which I like the name of, by the way. First of all, he's called Jonathan and I'm called Jonathan. Go Jonathan Club. And second, his last name is Cheek, and it just made me laugh when I read it. Anyway, these guys have done some research and created a bunch of questions to try and determine where you sit on this scale. But what's interesting is they haven't just got one scale for everything and every person. No. They break introversy into like 4 types. And the 4 types are social, thinking, anxious, and restrained. Now, these types of introverts share the same traits, like shyness, awkwardness, quietness, and just like preferring the company of themselves, but the reasons behind them are slightly different. So for a social introvert, for example, they're an introvert because they like the company of their own, well, they like their own company to larger crowds, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're anxious or nervous about it. That's just what they like, that's what they prefer. There's nothing wrong with that. Thinking introverts are quiet because, they are lost in their thoughts usually, so they don't seem to interact with the world as much, which is another reason they're classed as an introvert. Not because they don't like the crowds or anything, just because they're lost in their own thoughts and just like in their own imagination, really. Another one of these groups was the anxious introverts, which I feel like I fit into a little bit. And these like to keep to themselves because the idea of mixing with people, well, it causes fear and anxiety within someone. So like I said earlier, if I'm on my own in a group of people and I don't know anybody, I am a little shy and nervous to like talk to them, so I should probably fit into this group. And finally, there is this restrained, or sometimes called a reserved introvert. And these are people that think before they speak. And these people are usually described as people who take a little time to get going. They're a little slow per se. But that doesn't mean they're like, there's anything wrong with them or anything like that. They're just thinking about what they want to say to a group of people. And I feel like I kind of fit into this little group as well. And, reading all this, it kind of makes sense. We all know somebody who's usually away with the fairies, so to speak, or someone who's anxious about the world and the things around them, I believe people also don't have to be just fit into one type of introvert, basically. I think you could have a mixture of social and anxious introversy, or maybe you're a bit reserved, as well as, a thinking type of one. Because it's a complex thing, I think. Doing the research, I found that it's more of a complex thing than just like a black and white, you're an introvert or an extrovert. And the science and research tries to simplify these things and make simple answers out of it. And a lot of the time, that's not always the case, or that's not the case in most situations. Because there's not much in this world which is deemed simple, and people are like super complex as well. So why should introversion and extroversion be any different? Personally, I find all this stuff like really interesting to me. It's just so complex the further you go into it. It's like a rabbit hole of just like research. I just find it fascinating, just thinking about how people think and behave and just all that kind of stuff. And doing all this research is really cool and stuff, but I found that a lot of the information was based on more introverts and introversy, but extroverts could be just as complex and just as interesting to research. And one guy, this guy called Carl Jung, tried to, do some research on extroverts, and he also made 4 groups or 4 types of extroverts, similar to the introverts one that I've said. And these are classified as sensors, intuitors, I'm going to say intuitors, feelers, and thinkers. Now, sensors, or extrovert sensors, basically get their energies from their senses, touching things and interacting with the world physically. That's how they just get like their energy, their motivation to do things. Intuitors are more outgoing to people. When they talk, debate, they imagine and think with other people, So that's why they're like, they'll probably be the kinds of people that like debating with people or talking a lot or just have lots of big ideas they want to share with people. The feelers group are driven by other people and their emotions. They get more energy and confidence when they're around other people, which I can see that. If you're in a group with a good group of, they got a good vibe, you're all happy and smiling, you'll tend to feel, happy and smiling too. And the final group of extroverts was the extrovert thinkers. These are people who like to plan and structure, and they get a bit of an energy boost when it comes to social skills and just sharing a plan and structure and trying to work out how something's going to go. And what's interesting about this is that they still talk about recharging and needing time away from social groups, even though they are very sociable and talkative people, which is kind of interesting. And I think it's a common thing between both personality types, the fact that they need to charge and recharge and just have a bit of me time. But the amount of time they need to recharge is different depending on what personality trait you have. If you're an introvert, you can spend more time alone, which probably means you need more time to recharge. But if you're an extrovert, you need less time to recharge and you can stay out longer. And I really like this topic, I really do. And I would love to go into more detail about it, but I think that's a lot of information for like 10 minutes. So I'm going to leave it at that today. I'll remind you that the question for today is, do you think you're an introvert or an extrovert, or maybe even between? If you want to share your thoughts and opinions, let me know down below in the comments. That'd be really cool. So, thank you for listening to today. It was very heavy on info, but I think it was interesting, or at least I found it interesting. I hope you found it interesting as well. Keep safe, and remember, enjoy a cuppa.